Think you have to deal with crowds to visit national parks in peak season? Good news, you don't, because most people visit the parks the same exact way. They arrive mid-morning. They go to the same 3 spots. They follow the same path. And that's why the park feels crowded. But what's interesting is, even the busiest parks in the country, there are moments and places where it feels completely different. I'm Teresa from an acre in the city. I've traveled to all 50 states and over 80% of the National Park Service sites. And I've learned that avoiding crowds isn't just luck. It's about timing and strategy. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to avoid crowds in national parks, even during peak season. And I'll share one timing mistake that almost everyone makes, because fixing just that one thing can completely change your entire experience. Everyone says go early, but here's what most people get wrong. They go a little early. They show up at 8, maybe 9, but by then, the park is already getting filled up. What you actually want is that first hour. Sure, that might mean having to go back to the visitor center later in the day, but most parks are open 24 hours. You really want to arrive in the quiet window before the majority of the people show up. One of my favorite moments was in Yellowstone in the early morning. The fog was on the valley, and you could see animal outlines through the fog. It was so memorable and so calm and peaceful. It was amazing, especially when the sunlight was working its way through the fog. It was just so quiet, and not just the less crowded quiet, really quiet. That feeling, it disappears fast once the day starts going. So if you're going early, go earlier than you think. Now here's the part that hardly anyone talks about. Go late. Late afternoon and into evening is one of the best times to be in the park, because most visitors follow the same pattern. They arrive late morning, explore midday, and leave by late afternoon, which means crowds drop off more than you'd expect. And honestly, the experience is often better. Better light, cooler temperatures as the evening progresses, and a more relaxed pace. If you shift your day to later, it can completely change how the park feels. Another one of the simplest ways to avoid crowds is to use the less popular entrances. Many of the parks have multiple entrances, but most visitors use the same one, which can lead to long lines. So what happens? Traffic backs up. Parking lots get filled up. It becomes a bottleneck. But if you visit from the less popular side, even just once, you'll often notice the difference immediately. A good example is Glacier, the east side versus the west side. The west side has a lot of things to do nearby compared to the east side, which has less amenities. You'll notice that there's less congestion, more space, and a much smoother way to start your day. If you want examples of more parks that have multiple entrances, the Rocky Mountains, the Smoky Mountains, and Zion are all good examples. Next, go beyond the top 3. Most people only experience a small portion of the park. They go to the top viewpoints, maybe one famous trail, and then they leave. But most national parks are huge. In places like Zion, some of my favorite moments have been when we just kept going around the next bend, a little further down a trail, trying a new trail that wasn't on our radar. And suddenly, it feels like a completely different place. You don't need to hike 10 miles. Even going slightly beyond the busiest areas makes a huge difference. This is where things start to feel quieter and more personal. This is where planning makes all the difference. That's why I created my National Park Tips Guide. It helps you plan your days in a way that avoids the busiest times and makes your trip feel smoother overall. You can grab that from a link below. My next tip is to visit on the right days. This one is simple, but really impactful. Weekends are busy. Holidays, even busier. And peak travel weeks, those can feel completely overwhelming. But even shifting your trip slightly can make a noticeable difference. If you can visit on a Tuesday through Thursday, you'll almost always have a better experience. And even within a trip, try to plan your busiest parks on weekdays. Another good tip is to use weather to your advantage. This one is a little bit counterintuitive. Most people try to avoid anything less than perfect weather, but that's actually your opportunity. One of my favorite trips to Theodore Roosevelt National Park was in early May. The trails were a little bit muddy, but there were very few people visiting the park. And the wildlife, it was everywhere. It ended up being one of the best trips I've had there. So instead of aiming for perfect conditions, think about what slightly imperfect conditions might give you in return. Next, I want you to think about adjusting your expectations. This is a mindset shift that ties everything together. You don't need the park to be empty. You just need to avoid the busiest moments. Even in peak season, there are windows where things feel calm. And when you learn how to find those, the entire experience changes. So if you want to avoid crowds in the national parks, it's not about avoiding peak season altogether. It's about changing how you experience it. Going earlier than most people. Stay later than most people. Explore just a little bit farther. And plan with intention. And if you're trying to decide what parks to visit, check out my video on underrated national parks. Those are often a great way to avoid crowds altogether. And tell me in the comments, what's the least crowded park experience that you've had? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.